There's a place in Virginia that people don't talk about. A hotel at the edge of Pine Ridge that's been empty for over a century. Some say the shadows still move inside its halls. And if you stay too long, you might see why. Before we step inside, tell me where you're watching from tonight. And tell me, would you dare spend a night where the shadows walk? They said the hotel had been empty since the last guest checked out in the winter of 1899. But I saw movement inside, just before the lights came on. It was past midnight when I reached Pine Ridge. The mountains were hidden beneath a heavy fog, and the air had that cold, wet smell that lingers before a storm breaks. The town was silent, too silent, and the road that led to the old hotel twisted through trees that looked like they'd been standing watch for 100 years. Locals warned me to stay clear of the ridge after sundown. They said the hotel was cursed, that anyone who entered came back. Different. Some stopped talking altogether. Others simply disappeared. But curiosity has a way of outlasting fear. The moment I saw it, the tall, hollow building sitting at the edge of the mountain, it felt like it was waiting. Every window was dark except one on the 3rd floor. A single flicker of light moved across the glass. Slow, deliberate, like someone carrying a lantern through the hall. The strange thing was, there hadn't been electricity there since the 1890s. I remember stopping by the gate, my breath showing in the cold. The snow beneath my boots was untouched. No footprints leading in, none coming out. Yet inside, something was walking. The sound was faint, wooden boards stretching, a floorboard groaning under weight, then another and another, not fast, not hurried, just steady. And in that moment, I realized the shadows on the upper floor didn't match the rhythm of the wind outside. They were moving in patterns, patterns too human to ignore. They told me the hotel had been sealed for decades. But if that's true, then who turned the light on? And why did it feel like something on the other side of the window was watching me first? Pine Ridge was one of those towns that seemed to have been built by accident. A collection of wooden houses pressed too close together, like they were afraid of being alone in the mountains. By the late 1800s, it had been a thriving railway stop for miners and travelers passing through southern Virginia. But when the rail line moved, the town began to vanish, one family at a time. At the very top of that winding road, where the mountain leaned against the sky, stood the Pine Ridge Hotel. Locals once called it the Ridge View. 3 stories of hand-carved oak, glass doors framed with iron hinges, and a long wraparound porch that creaked even when no one stood on it. They said you could hear the boards whispering at night, the sound of guests long gone. When I got close enough to see the sign, the paint was almost gone. The letters had peeled into ghostly shapes, but you could still make out the name. Faint, trembling under the weight of time. There was a stillness about the place, the kind of stillness that comes just before something happens. The fog seemed to cling to the building like a memory that refused to lift. The doors were chained shut, rusted over. The glass was fogged and cracked. And yet, there were fresh boot prints near the entrance, small, pointed at the toe, as if someone had been there recently. I remember brushing my hand across the wood of the porch railing. It was damp, but warm, like someone had touched it before me. Inside, through a crack in one of the windows, I could just barely see the grand lobby. Dust coated everything, but the chandelier still hung from the ceiling, its crystals dark with soot. The front desk was covered in old check-in books, their pages stiff with moisture. A faint smell drifted out through the glass, something between rainwater and old perfume. the kind of scent that lingers in fabric long after someone has left the room. The air felt thicker near the windows, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Locals said the hotel closed after the great snowstorm of 1899. Guests were trapped inside for 3 days before rescuers could reach them. By then, only 2 were alive. They never spoke about what happened in those 3 days. One of them, a maid named Clara Wren, left town the following spring and was never seen again. The other, well, no one could agree on who the other survivor even was. Some said a traveler. Some said the owner himself. The official records were lost in a fire years later. But even now, when the wind passes through the hollow of the valley, it carries a sound. Faint, like a door closing from somewhere far away. Standing there on that mountain road, looking up at the Pine Ridge Hotel, I could feel it. That same pressure in the air that comes before thunder. That quiet sense that something inside was aware of me. The way a house might recognize the sound of its own name being spoken again after a century of silence. And as the fog thickened around the roofline, I could swear I saw movement through the top window. A flicker, brief but deliberate. A shape that shifted, then stood still. I don't know if it was a shadow, or if the building was simply reflecting mine. But I remember one thing clearly. The light changed. It wasn't lightning. It was warm, golden, like lamplight, inside a hotel that had no electricity. I decided to wait until morning before going inside. But morning never really came to Pine Ridge, not the kind that felt alive. The fog just turned pale, hanging low over the trees like it was afraid to lift. The hotel sat at the center of it, still and enormous, every window black, except for that same one on the top floor. When I looked again, the light was gone. The air was colder that day. I could see my breath clouding in front of me, slow and heavy. The ground was soft, melted snow mixing with mud, and with every step closer to the porch, the world felt quieter, like sound itself didn't want to follow me any farther. I remember pressing my ear to the door. Nothing, not even wind. But when I leaned away, I caught it. A sound so faint, it almost didn't exist. It wasn't footsteps. It wasn't the settling of the wood. It was a hum. A low, steady hum, like someone whispering from behind a wall. I followed it along the porch, toward a side window, where the glass had cracked open just enough to slip through. My hand brushed against the frame, and the wood felt damp again. But not from the rain. It was warm. Inside, the lobby was larger than I imagined. The chandelier hung above me, trembling slightly, even though the air was still. The wallpaper peeled down the walls in long, curling strips. And yet, in the center of the room, the floor was swept clean. The footprints were small, delicate, bare feet, it looked like. They trailed across the wooden floor and disappeared near the staircase. The steps leading up were half rotted, the carpet frayed to threads. Each board complained under my weight, echoing up the narrow shaft. And somewhere above, something moved. Softly, almost careful. When I reached the second floor, I found a hallway of doors, 15 of them, each numbered, though most of the numbers had rusted away. The wallpaper was darker here, water-stained from years of rain creeping through the ceiling. And that smell, that same strange blend of rain and perfume, was stronger now. Room 204 had its door open a few inches. I pushed it slowly. The hinges didn't creak. They sighed. Inside was a single bed frame, no mattress, a broken chair, and a mirror on the far wall. The mirror was clean, too clean. No dust, no cracks, just smooth glass that seemed to shimmer in the half-light. As I looked into it, the reflection of the room matched perfectly. Except for one thing. The door behind me was open in real life. But in the reflection, it was closed. I turned. It was open. When I turned back, there was a figure standing behind me in the mirror. Not close, just far enough to be seen, near the doorway, facing my direction. I blinked, and it was gone. But the air felt different now. Heavy. Still. Like the whole building was holding its breath again. I stepped out of the room, heart pounding, and saw something on the floorboards. A wet footprint, small, bare, leading toward the stairs that went higher. Every instinct told me to leave, but curiosity, or something like it, pushed me forward. The third floor was worse. The wallpaper there had turned to mold, and the hallway leaned slightly to one side. The ceiling above was cracked, showing pieces of sky through rotted wood. At the far end of the hall, a door stood open, faint light spilling from it. That same warm, golden glow I'd seen from outside. As I approached, I noticed something odd about the light. It didn't move like candlelight. It didn't flicker. It pulsed, like it was breathing. And as I got closer, I heard something faint. The whispering again, clearer now. Two voices, one low, one high. They weren't speaking words I could understand. It was rhythmic, almost like prayer. I stopped at the doorway. Inside, the room looked untouched by time. The bed was still made. The curtains hung clean. And in the center of the room stood two figures, their backs to me, motionless. They weren't solid, not exactly. Their shapes wavered faintly, like reflections in water. I could see through them, and beyond them, the window that looked out over the valley. One of them turned. The shape was faint, but the outline of a woman's face came into view. Delicate, her hair pinned up, like women wore it in the late 1800s. Her eyes, though, didn't look like eyes. They were hollow spaces that caught the light without reflecting it. Her mouth moved, slowly, like she was whispering. And I swear I heard my name. The light pulsed once. Then everything went dark. When the light returned, the room was empty. The bed was still made. But there were two impressions in the dust, shaped like footprints. One small, one larger, both facing the door. And from somewhere below, the chandelier began to swing, just slightly, as if the air itself had been disturbed. When I reached the top of the stairs, the storm outside had turned violent. Rain lashed against the roof, the wind howling through shattered windows. Each gust carried whispers, short, broken phrases that scattered before I could understand them. The third-floor hallway felt longer than before. It stretched endlessly, doors lining either side, though I knew there had only been 5 when I first walked through. Now, there were more. Maybe 10, maybe 20. The air shimmered faintly, and the floor seemed to tilt under my steps. I looked down and realized something strange. The wet footprints I had been following were gone. In their place, the floorboards gleamed, damp, but with no trace of water on my boots. That's when I noticed it. My reflection in the window beside me didn't match. My body was still, but in the glass. I was walking, just a half-second out of sync. I stopped. In the reflection, I didn't. It turned its head toward me, slowly, until the reflection's face met mine directly. And though its lips didn't move, I heard it whisper, "You shouldn't be here." The glass cracked, one clean line splitting across the pane, and I stumbled backward. The hum from below returned, deeper now, vibrating through the walls, through the bones of the hotel itself. I turned toward the end of the corridor. The last door, the one with light pulsing from beneath it, was now wide open. Inside, the air shimmered like heat, though the room was freezing cold. The furniture was old but untouched. A dress, white, soaked as if with rain, hung from a wooden stand. The veil lay across the bed, and on the floor, a trail of small, wet footprints circled the room, ending at the window. The window itself was closed, but the rain, impossibly, fell through it. It dripped along the frame, soaking the floor, pooling near the footprints. I took one step inside. The door slammed shut behind me. The hum rose, now sharp and layered, like dozens of voices whispering at once. I pressed my hands against my ears, but the sound came from inside my head. It wasn't words. It was emotion, grief, loneliness, an echo of something ancient and unfinished. Then, from the corner of the room, she appeared. The woman from before. The bride. Her figure rippled faintly, like she was made of mist and memory. Her gown hung heavy with invisible rain, and her head was tilted slightly to one side, as though she was listening. The air shifted around her, bending light the way heat bends distance. When she lifted her face, her eyes reflected nothing. Just hollow, endless black. She spoke without sound. Her lips moved slowly, painfully, like she was forcing a voice she no longer had. Then the lights began to flicker. 1 pulse, 2, 3, and the reflection in the mirror beside her started to move differently. It wasn't her reflection. It was another shape, taller, standing just behind her. It leaned forward, a shadow detaching itself from her body, and stretched until it touched the floor. And then, it stepped away from her completely. It didn't have a face, but its outline was clear, human, male, and wrong in the way it moved. Each motion came with a lag, like it was remembering how to exist. The bride didn't turn. She only whispered again, a single phrase that carried through the static, through the thunder, through the cold. He never left. The lights flared white. Every shadow in the room shifted at once, not cast by objects, but moving on their own. They crawled along the walls, stretching and twisting like smoke underwater. The floor vibrated. The chandelier downstairs clattered violently. Doors opened and slammed through the hallways. And then, everything stopped. The silence was sudden and absolute. The only sound left was the steady drip of water from the ceiling, landing near my feet. When I looked down, the puddle had grown wider, too wide for a simple leak. A drop fell from above and splashed red. I looked up. There was no ceiling anymore, only darkness stretching upward like an endless shaft. Something moved in it. Slow, deliberate, heavy. The shape of a man, walking toward the edge of the darkness, step by step. When he reached the light, I saw his face, or what was left of it. His eyes were black voids, his jaw slack, his expression a perfect echo of despair. And beside him, the bride, standing as still as the air around her. They were looking at each other but not seeing, like two ghosts forever caught in the same unfinished moment. I stepped backward, breath trembling, heart pounding in my ears. The man's head turned sharply toward me, and for the first time, both figures moved together, reaching. The shadows stretched across the room, crawling toward my feet like ink spreading through water. I stumbled for the door. It wouldn't open. The handle twisted, but refused to move. Then, right beside my ear, so close it felt real, a whisper broke through the dark. "You checked in, didn't you?" The air went cold enough to sting, and before everything went black again, I saw my reflection in the window, soaked in rain that wasn't falling, and standing directly beside me, the bride. When I woke, the storm was gone. Morning light poured through the windows, pale and weak, spilling across the cracked wallpaper. The air was still, heavy with that same scent of wet dust and decay. For a while I thought I had dreamed the whole thing, until I noticed my boots. They were soaked, completely drenched, dripping onto the wooden floor that was bone dry everywhere else. The door that wouldn't open the night before now swung freely. The hall outside was shorter again, back to how it should have been. Every door was shut, numbered, still. I walked downstairs, my hand sliding along the dusty banister. The chandelier that had shaken hours earlier hung motionless now, its crystals catching faint shards of light. The floorboards that once echoed footsteps now stayed silent, no matter how hard I tried to make them creak. And yet, the footprints were there. 2 sets, small and large, leading from the staircase into the lobby, then stopping halfway, right beneath the chandelier. The last step was only half formed, like whoever made it had simply faded mid-stride. I stepped outside into the chill air. The fog had lifted, revealing the valley below. Endless pines, soaked in silver mist. The hotel loomed behind me, quiet, unbothered, like a corpse pretending to sleep. When I reached the gate, I turned back once more. Every window was dark again, except one. The same one. Top floor. A faint flicker of light pulsed there, once, twice, and though the wind had stopped, the rain had stopped, and everything around me was still. The sound of a single footstep echoed from somewhere inside the hotel. It wasn't walking toward me. It was pacing, back and forth, back and forth. The rhythm of someone waiting. Later, when I spoke to the locals again, one of them, an old man, his hands trembling, told me the story I hadn't known in full. The Pine Ridge Hotel had closed after a tragedy. In December of 1899, a bride named Clara Wendell was meant to marry a traveling salesman from Richmond. He checked in the night before their wedding, but never checked out. They found his belongings still folded in his room, his coat, his pocket watch, even his vows, untouched, but not him, not a trace. Clara waited in her wedding dress through the storm that night. She refused to leave, certain he would return. The staff left her tea and blankets, but by dawn she was gone too. When they searched her room, the window was open, the floor wet, and on the glass, handprints, as if someone had pressed against it from the outside. They closed the hotel that same winter, and for more than a century, no one has stayed there longer than a few hours. The old man told me that on rainy nights, travelers still see a light flicker on in the top window. Sometimes they hear 2 sets of footsteps, sometimes only one. I asked him, "Do you think she ever found him?" He looked past me, up toward the ridge, and said, "Maybe." But the thing that walks beside her now isn't who she was waiting for. When I drove away that evening, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, and for the briefest second, I swear I saw the outline of someone sitting in the back seat. A veil, a faint shimmer of rain on fabric that shouldn't be wet. I didn't turn around, I just kept driving. But sometimes, when the weather turns, I hear it again. That faint rhythm just outside my window. Back and forth, back and forth. The sound of footsteps pacing above me, still waiting. Some say the last guests never left. Some say the shadows choose who they show themselves to. If you're still watching, you're braver than most. Subscribe to Dark Room of Whispers, and step back in when the night calls.